Welcome everyone to the fourth episode of Positive Parenting with VM Foundation. I'm Samantha Charles, CEO of VM Foundation. For this Parents Month, we are partnering with the University of the West Indies and the Child and Adolescent Unit from the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Western Regional Health Authority to bring you rich discussions on issues affecting you, our parents. Stay with us. Welcome back. In this episode, we focus on discipline and the child and how to better parent your child. With me today is Melody Samuels, Regional Clinical Psychologist for the Child Protection and Family Services Agency. Melody is a licensed associate clinical psychologist who has served the CPFSA for over 12 years in the Northeast region, which spans St. Mary, Portland, and St. Anne. With some training in play therapy, Melody applies her knowledge to helping children and families within the CPFSA's reach and beyond. She has also helped to coordinate and run therapeutic camps for the agency. Welcome, Melody.
Thank you.
Happy to have you today.
Good to be here.
Is there a wrong or right way to discipline?
Well, I would say that there are certain principles that we can bear in mind as we try to discipline our children. First of all, that word discipline often immediately conjures up images of shouting and hitting. And when we think of discipline, I would want to refocus our minds more to guidance, to shaping. So the idea with discipline is that you want to help your child become the best version of themselves.
Yes.
And so out of that will flow certain actions and attitudes. So is there a right or a wrong way? It's first of all, it's the approach, it's the attitude to discipline that should not flow out of an attitude of anger or rage.
Yes.
It should be something that is well thought out, approached in a measured way, in a controlled way, with an end in mind.
And discipline is necessary, isn't that
It's
right?
absolutely necessary. And it is how we help our children to make the best of themselves in life. So you want to be consistent. So discipline means that the person doing the discipline also should be disciplined.
Indeed, of
Yes.
course, set the example.
Set the example.
Yes.
So they themselves should be showing how things should be done, but they also should be consistent in what they ask from their children. So those are some important principles. Discipline is about shaping. It shouldn't be done out of rage or
Yes.
excess anger. And it should be consistent. A person who is demonstrating the principles consistently, but also expecting consistently from their child.
Indeed. Very, very, very important. I think the important term there is consistency.
Indeed.
And I think parents need to understand that positive parenting also involves a certain level of consistency.
Absolutely.
For you to become a parent that is positively transforming the lives of your children every day.
Exactly.
You want to be very consistent.
Yes.
Indeed. And what do you think is the impact of culture and faith on disciplining a child?
Well, when we talk about culture, which naturally overlaps with faith, as we said earlier, when we think of discipline, we think of shouting and hitting.
Yes.
And, we have the adage that is often used, spare the rod and spoil the child. And so that has, I think, given license, and I think perhaps part of our history as well has fed into that, given license for us to approach discipline many times in a way that can become abusive. So hitting our children in fits of rage, hitting them with anything that comes to hand, saying things to our children that are demeaning, that are, seeking to just bring them down, comparing them, in a very negative and derogatory way with other things or people. These things are part of our culture, I believe, in many ways, and it's something that we definitely need to step away from. You know, and as the CPFSA, we are trying to help people to understand that there are other ways of disciplining apart from hitting and apart from saying mean things to your children. It's all about setting clear boundaries. It's all about helping children to understand the whys of why you're doing something, and bringing them into the process as they get older and are able to understand more. Another important thing I wanted to raise is this issue of toxic masculinity. Part of our culture, part of our culture has often been that men, male or boys, are not allowed to emote. They're not allowed to show their feelings. So when they have been given a negative consequence, they're not to cry. When something bad happens, they're not to cry, and they're to be tough, and they are to, in some ways, we want them to be cold, to be emotionless. And so we are surprised when they get older and they are getting into fights. They're becoming very heartless and callous in their actions. And why is this? Because we have inculcated it as part of our culture of toxic masculinity. We want to free up our men to know that they can have feelings too, to know that they can be comforted when they feel down, when they feel sad, and to know that they in turn can be comforting and sensitive to others. If we raise our boys in this way, then we will be seeing healthier relationships with their spouses, with their children as they grow and become parents as well. So that's an important part of culture that I think we need to be moving away from.
Yes. And faith, do you think faith has any impact on
I think faith
discipline?
has an impact, and I think, you know, you can say faith, you can say religion, you know, and, you know, so you have the spirit of the rod spoil the child side of things, which can be negative, but you have also the side of faith, which is about love. You know, and I think if we can help people who are people of faith to understand that parenting is about love. It's about being like God, a loving father, you know, a caring father, a father who looks to the future and sees how, you know, sees potential. Then if we can grab a hold of that as Jamaicans who call ourselves Christians and other faiths, and act in love, then I think that can really make a difference. And I think it does make a difference for many parents. You know, many of our parents who are exemplary parents are people of faith, people who take their faith seriously in every area of their lives.
Yes, and it permeates their relationship that they have with their family and at their homes. This series is about positive parenting, as you know, and earlier we said that discipline connotes a level of negativism. Is there any way we could change that notion, that image? Is there anything we could do as parents, young parents, even older parents now who are, you know, parenting? Is there any way we could change that? Because that's a very important point that you made, because I do believe so. It does connote, when you say I'm going to discipline the child, it does connote maybe something negative, beating, fear, shouting. So it does. Is there anything that we could do to change that?
I think on a societal level, I think VM Foundation is doing exactly that. I think we're bringing to the fore another viewpoint of parenting.
Absolutely.
Yes, so I think that we can do that. I think as government, CPFSA definitely is trying to do that as we do our parenting programming and training and that kind of thing. So we're trying to change the image of parenting. We're trying to change the ethos of parenting. What is the foundational principle of parenting? But as parents, you know, since I have this platform, I would appeal to us as Jamaican parents that we rethink the approach that we take to disciplining our children. Let us instead begin with relationship. And out of relationship, you'll be amazed, good relationship, you'll be amazed what you're able to bring out of your child, what responses you're able to get when you have this foundation of good relationship. I don't think that we have really inculcated that in past generations, where you have this good relationship, spending time, in many cases, not in all cases, but I want to encourage us to start with the relationship. Be consistent, set clear boundaries and rules, and then follow through in a fair and measured manner. Measured meaning as calm as you can be and doing it for a particular reason in the future.
Good advice. Thank you for that, Melody. Is there anything such as too little discipline or too much discipline?
Okay, and I'm glad you raised that, because we definitely want to bring some balance.
Yes.
You know, so,
I think so.
There is, I mean, Jamaicans know about spoiling the child. You know, we know that there are some children that will look and we say that one's spoiled. And what do we mean by that? Usually we're talking about permissive parenting, and there are different types of parenting that have been classified. And when we say spoil a child, we mean permissive parenting, where the parent really is not doing their job. they're not getting in there and setting those rules and boundaries. They're not establishing certain standards and expectations for their children.
Yes.
And so that is as bad and perhaps even worse than someone who is authoritarian and really getting in there with too much, too intense in terms of the anger and the boundaries being unreasonable and that kind of thing.
It requires balance then.
So it requires some balance.
A fine line, a very good balance.
Yes, we're balancing expectations and we're balancing the warmth and the caring side of parenting.
Yes.
So parenting is not just about hitting and shouting and rules. It's also about warmth. It's about connection and nurturance.
So may I ask you this then? What have you been observing in terms of the implications of negative discipline?
Okay.
We're all about here trying to change the picture to positive parenting. Parenting includes discipline in your child. What are some of the negative implications of discipline?
And those are some of the children that we see that come to us at CPFSA.
Yes.
One of the styles of parenting that I did not mention, and which is something that is actually punishable under law in Jamaica, is neglectful parenting. So you will have children that come to us who have been neglected for one reason or another. Sometimes parents are mentally ill.
Yes.
Sometimes they're absent and they don't have childcare support and so on, and so they're making these decisions that are to the detriment of the child. And when a child is neglected, especially early on, you find that there's a profound impact on their psyche, so that this child who comes up has very skewed relational practices. They don't know how to relate to people. You'd be amazed at how much a relationship with a newborn baby, an infant, and their mother or their primary caregiver makes a difference in how they approach the world in general for the rest of their life. And so it's important for us to understand that we don't want to neglect our children either.
Yes.
Another thing too is, as we talk about abuse, as we talk about hitting and so on, we see that the children who come to us many times, they come to us because of uncontrollable behavior. That is the term that we're trying to move away from, but that, people bring that.
Yes.
They come to us, they're at school, they're fighting, they're aggressive, they resist authority figures. Many times, these are children who have been abused.
Yes.
And
it manifests in this way.
Right, it manifests because they're learning violence. They're harboring a lot of resentment inside their hearts. They can't do anything about it to the caregiver because they're fearful, but it gets poured onto other people that they come into contact with.
And certainly disciplining a child that exhibits these things is vastly different from being at home and being in a family and doing something naughty. There's a great difference in terms of how you would discipline somebody who is showing that.
When you're getting to the extreme part of things now, which is the children that I tend to see now, then we have to sort of become more strategic in our approaches to helping these children to become, good members of society.
Yes.
But I should also make a note here that, there are some children who have disorders. Yes? And that's something that we must bear in mind. If as a parent you're finding that you're doing these regular parts of parenting and your child is not responding to them, and you're finding that the problem perhaps is getting worse or it's just intractable, it's not changing, there may be a disorder at play. So you look back into your family history. Do we have problems with mental health? We look at, the child and how they're doing in school. If there also has been a change in their functioning, and out of that, we want to perhaps seek some help.
Yes.
Talk to the guidance counselor.
And parents that are faced with those kinds of things, a child with a disorder, whom they may or may not know the child has a disorder, how does discipline play a part there? Will they understand how to discipline? Does the child need discipline or need something else?
Well, and so that is why you would need to go to someone who has more knowledge.
Yes.
So I think you would want to start with your guidance counselor at school. You might talk to your class teacher first, or they may bring something to your attention. And then from there, you may be referred on to the CPFSA. You may want to go the private route and, see a practitioner, see a psychologist.
Yes.
You may, the public health system also has child guidance clinics that help with children who have certain disorders. So there are different options that we have. There are different routes that these problems may be noticed and noted, and we go through and see how we can help these children.
Indeed. I noticed you have studied play therapy.
Yes.
And have you been able to utilize that? How have you utilized that in terms of discipline and the negative implications for children?
Okay. Well,
Tell us a little bit about that.
At the CPFSA, that is one of the courses of training that we have emphasized and also equipped our offices with. So we have playrooms. Yes, which, you know, when a child comes into a playroom, their eyes light up.
Absolutely.
But the premise is that in play, toys are children's language. And so play is, toys are their words rather, and play is their language, especially for the younger side of things.
Yes.
And so for many children who maybe don't have exposure to toys much in their environment, or if they do, but they come into this space where there are a lot of toys for them to express themselves, many times you can use play to begin to assess what's going on with a child, because they play out what's going on at home many times in their play. Sometimes it's symbolic, sometimes it's actually literal in terms of what they're using. And giving them that space also, the theory is that when they have the room to express themselves, the time and the space to, in an unfettered way, express themselves in play, this is healing for them. This is therapeutic. You know, and you can also be more deliberate about guiding them through, teaching them principles in play and that kind of thing. But certainly, I encourage parents to let your children play.
Yes, because, you know, sometimes I think even going up, child, you play too much outside, you play too much, come inside now. Maybe this is an opportunity to get your book. This is an opportunity for us to emphasize that this is part of positive parenting, allowing your child to play, giving your child enough free time to be able to be themselves, to discover. Because through play, you do discover, you explore, and there are obviously opportunities for learning on a different level that is outside of the regular structured school system.
Absolutely.
Play does provide that. Yes?
I should also mention that it is good for parents to play with their children. Yes,
I would imagine that this pandemic and this lockdown has allowed us to be able to do that.
And I would hope so. Yes, I hope so. So, you know, parents, take the opportunity to play with your children. As we talk about building relationships, this is an important and useful arena for us to build relationships. Spend time playing. Be silly. You know, let down your hair, become your inner child. You let it show. And you'll be amazed at that bonding that can happen and what you also discover in your children as you observe in play together.
Yes, and as we wrap up, tell me some of your recommendations for positive parenting discipline. What are some of your recommendations?
All right. So, you know, one of the things that I think, and as children get older, this is more relevant. It is good to have regular times together as family where you discuss, and as parents you can instruct and share the rules and expectations of family, of children in the family. So it means that you're going to be giving them responsibilities, chores, and that kind of thing. And so this is a space where it can be laid down. Family meetings, family dinners, family meals together. Have a regular setting where you come together and affirm these things. But this setting also allows your children to give feedback. So it should be a space where children can speak up and say, well, I don't agree, or I agree, or, you know, I felt really sad, or something like that. So it's a space where there's feedback. So while you maintain your principles and your rules, you have feedback and you also discuss consequences in this setting as well. Another thing too is that as we do consequences, because that's an important part of discipline and rearing a child, you want to make the consequences match the crime. So you don't want it to be that the child dropped a glass by accident, and because of that they're grounded for 3 days, and you know they're locked in their room. So you want it to match the crime, as it were. You want so punishment should be fair, consequences should be fair and measured, and as much as possible be naturally flowing out of the situation. So for example, if a child breaks their siblings' tablet, as it were, they have to let their sibling use their tablet. You know, something that matches the natural, you know, or they have to make restitution for something that they did. So try as much as possible for it to match, flow naturally as a consequence from what they did. So that's another thing that we can do as parents. So be consistent, set rules together, make consequences be natural, and sometimes you can go, you know, more regimental. You can go more pictorial by having a chart that outlines, you know, perhaps something that you're working on with a child that you want them to improve on, perhaps their duties. And then tied into that sort of chart where you say, okay, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, did you do this? Did you clean your room? And out of that, either there's a consequence or a reward.
Indeed, that's a very good strategy, in fact, Melody, because children learn in different ways. Some are visual,
That's
and so a
right.
chart with pretty diagrams, pictures,
Stars, stickers, and so on.
might be different from a child who's auditory in
That's
terms of
right.
learning. So that child may listen a lot, but visuals are not important to them, whereas another child, visuals might just be. So again, too, we need to know our children
Yes.
and be able to know how to reach our children.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yes,
whilst
thank you for
building
pointing that out.
relationships as well.
Yes.
So thank you for that. I think it's important what you've said in terms of feedback. Discipline needs to be consistent, it needs to be measured, it needs to be fair. I think also parents need to understand too that discipline does not connote negative. Discipline is really about trying to make things better in a positive way, if we put it that way, making it better in a positive way, trying to see the best out of it and seeing it as a learning opportunity for your child and for your child to reach their full potential while learning what's right and what's wrong.
Exactly.
Indeed. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
On Positive Parenting with VM Foundation. We're very happy to have had you. I think our parents would have benefited for some of those tips and strategies and certainly some of the resources that are available as well. Thank you everyone for watching. This has been Positive Parenting with VM Foundation and I'm your CEO, Samantha Charles. If you need support as a parent, you may call the National Parenting Support Commission at 876-560-9272. There is also support for our children at the child guidance clinics at our hospitals and health centers throughout Jamaica. We have the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Unit at the Ministry of Health at 876-633-8100. And there is the Jamaica National Helpline for Children and Teens Safe Spot at 1-888-723-3776. And you may WhatsApp them at 876-439-5199. If you need to reach VM Foundation, please send us an email at vmfoundation@myvmgroup.com. We wish for you positive parenting experiences always. Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on VM Group's YouTube and Facebook pages and the UE Mona Western Jamaica campus's YouTube page. Thank you so much for being here at our penultimate episode in our series of Positive Parenting with VM Foundation. Melody, thank you for being back with us. It was a wonderful discussion.
It was a good discussion, yes. Thanks for having me back.
You're most welcome. I want to start off by asking a question that I see in the chat. And for viewers, please do post your questions in the chat feature below. So let me start with the first question we have for you tonight. How does discipline change at the different stages of development? For example, at a toddler stage, preteen, and adolescent. I'm giving you a whole mouthful to start.
Yes. That is definitely a very good question. And I think that certainly it has to do with how we communicate. So that when we have a younger child, certainly we have to communicate with them in very simple ways, and we won't be able to communicate certain complex ideas to them. And so we have to be really very direct with our redirecting and our interventions in terms of the actions that we want from them. So for younger children, it may mean that you have to actually physically hold on to a child and physically redirect them to where you want them to be, you know. So for younger children, communication is going to be much more simple, much more direct. As we get older, we're speaking to our children more in terms of explaining and speaking with them and working with them through the process. And so you're saying, I don't want you to do that because. And there are times when you have to say, well, you know, mommy and daddy understand more, so please just work with me. But communication gets more complex and it gets more in terms of explaining. As you get older, what you have now is more negotiating. So you're wanting your child to as they go into adolescence and go through and approaching adulthood, you want them to be able to think through situations. You want them to be able to to make decisions for themselves based on good principles. You want to also be able to facilitate them thinking autonomously, and developing, their sense of self. And so you're bringing them into making decisions. So you've set your rules, at every stage, you know what your expectations are, you set them, you communicate them, and you bring the child into deciding what are going to be the consequences for this action, because we agree that this is not expected. We don't allow that in this household. And so, you have more involvement. But definitely you want to be showing consequences for actions, and rewards. You want to be using praise. You want to be, using, ways in which they can understand the consequences and benefits of their actions.
Yes, you mentioned negotiating. How much negotiating can be done?
Yes,
should we be negotiating with our kids?
We're not used to that in Jamaica. That's true. But the fact is, modern parenting practice allows for communication, and where it is, and so it's not always practical. Yes, there's some things where you draw a line and it's black and white. But there's some things where, you can listen to what the child has to say and say, okay, well then, what do you think we should do therefore? Or, Mom, this is what I want to do, and I don't think you should be, I don't think it's wise, or I'm not going to be allowing you. And the child can say, okay, how about this? And you say, okay, fine. If you can finish your chores by this time, then you will be allowed to do that, but nothing before. So you kind of, the lines of communication being open is good.
Yes. So out are the days of do as I say and not as I do, or children must be seen
and not heard,
but not heard. Is that where we're at now? That time is gone. Well, that's good to hear, actually, because I think our children of nowadays, based on the exposure that they have with the just being able to access information, it probably is very difficult now to really try to put that kind of discipline around a child who is in this modern 21st century that has lots of opinion, lots of thoughts, lots of ideas, and I think.
Yeah, so I don't want to be mistaken for saying that, what they say goes. Let me be clear that parents need to know what we're about. We need to know what our principles are, and we will not compromise those principles. There have to be,
and set those boundaries.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And set the boundaries. Okay. Yes. I have another question for you. What are specific healthy discipline strategies for a toddler who is defiant? If I'm not to spank them, what can I do?
Okay.
Terrible twos and the toddlers, they're probably at that stage.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we're encouraged to do is to redirect. So sometimes it is not necessary to go aggressive with it, but simply to redirect your child's attention to something else that they can pay attention to, and that is rewarding. So that you don't even get into the power struggle if you don't need to. Yeah. So if a child is doing something, they don't, you don't want them to be doing that. You say, hey, look at this, and then their mind is off that thing that they were up to. And so it's not, that doesn't have to be a showdown at that time, But there are ways in which you're going to have to stand your ground while the child tests you, And so it's important for us to be calming ourselves, to be knowing how to manage our own emotions as this child, this 2-year-old, test you, because that's what they're doing. They're testing, they're pushing the limits, they're trying to establish their own authority and place in the individuality rather, and place in the family. And so you kind of have to be able to stand your ground through the course of the terrible twos. But also, you watch them, you understand where there's danger. Sometimes in danger, you have to, make it very clear and very sharply clear that they need to stop what they're doing. So there's sometimes when you have to get, snappy, but there are other times when you can redirect.
Yes, and I think it's getting that balance right is what a lot of parents struggle with, but it has to be done. I have a question from YouTube by Faye Dixon. She says, how do I know that I'm using discipline as opposed to punishment? I think that's a very good question. How do we know?
Well, and I think it's more a matter of that the fact that punishment is a subset of discipline. Okay, so punishment has its place in discipline. Okay, so let's not get, we're not throwing punishment out the door at all, but we're using it within us, within a bigger system. It's a system, as I said, founded on relationship, and a system where the caregiver is consistent, and then punishment comes out of that system. We have set our rules, and these are the consequences. The consequences will be punishments. Okay, and then now also we have set our rules. These are the rewards for good behavior. You know, so punishment is a part of it. Don't get me wrong. Punishment is a part.
Right. Yes, very interesting. What's the impact of lack of discipline on a child?
Okay, so we, as we had mentioned in the talk, there is that's where you're seeing spoiling, right? Okay, so the consequences of that, you get a child who does not know how to take no for an answer. And so if they are, you know, if you try to set a boundary for them, then they'll get upset. You may see in the younger children tantrums. You may see similarly in the older children tantrums, but, you know, of bigger consequences. You may see that when they go into a situation where there are other authority figures, because they're not accustomed to having boundaries set for them when they're younger or when they're at home, then now when they come into another setting, whether at school and as they go older at work and that kind of thing, in relationship, they are not able to respond well to authority figures. And so there are sometimes ones who are pushing always against authority figures and not responding well to discipline. And it also can affect their own self-discipline, their own ability to manage themselves in life. When they did not have that external figure managing them when they were younger, they would have not learned how to put a stop on themselves. Because when you are disciplined, when there's punishment and boundaries and consequences and rewards when you're younger, what's happening is that you are learning to because a child naturally wants to go and grab that cookie or wants to find out what happens when they stick their hand in this hole, you know, or they stick the knife in that socket. They want to find out. But then you're teaching them that, no, I am not allowing you to do that. And so you have to stop yourself. And so a child has to learn internally, we call it the super ego, internally learning to stop themselves from doing what they are inclined to do, what they want to do. And so as they get that from an external force growing up, they know, and as they get older, they will begin to exercise that on themselves. And so a child coming from a structured home, a home where there are clear rules, is more likely to be someone who can structure themselves, who can set for themselves boundaries and plans and so on, because that's the sort of environment that they're used to.
So it definitely affects relationships with themselves and as well as relationships with others. So it is very important. So reiterating the fact that discipline is an important part of growing up and certainly should be a part of growing up. I have a question here on Facebook from Juani Johnson. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She says, good night. My daughter is very hyperactive and she just can't stay in one place, not even for a second. And she's easily distracted and she's only 6 years old. What can I do now that I'm the one doing online class with her? I can hear it in that parent's voice. Online classes in a pandemic, 6-year-old at home.
Yeah, it's not, my heart goes out to parents whenever I hear of a scenario like this, because it's not easy. It's not easy for regular kids, much less someone who is struggling with hyperactivity and that kind of thing. I mean, a 6-year-old is naturally active anyway, but you're saying that she's very hyperactive. My heart goes out to you. And, you know, I think it may be that it'd be good for you to get professional help to get the child assessed, to see what's really going on there, to see if it is ADHD, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and to get some strategies from the practitioner for that. And if it's really bad, the medication maybe called for. So that's you know, something you may want to consider. Also, I mean, I think you may want to work with your teacher to see if you can come up with strategies, maybe for shorter periods of learning with a, you know, more frequent breaks so that she can get, you know, cool out and then come back. So a good thing might be to talk with the teacher and to see how we can do some different strategies. Or maybe you can have a reward system that you work out with your teacher so that if the child, you know, you set up a charting system. If the child is able to keep it together for 20 minutes or however long the session may be, then they'll get this, and so they have something to look forward to in the short term, so that they can hold themselves together. And so various strategies can be worked out, but you're getting the help from your teacher. You're getting the help from maybe a psychologist who might be doing assessments or therapy with your child.
And during your chat, you emphasize the point of disciplining for a reason. How important it is to give a reason? Do you just want to comment on that again for us,
okay.
for viewers?
Okay, so that can mean the two different things as pop into my head. For a reason, meaning that parents kind of have a sense of what kind of character they want to form out of their child, what they understand that if I allow my child to do this, it is going to result in this kind of character. And so this is why I am saying, no, you cannot do that. No, I will not allow you to do that. Or yes, I'll allow you to do that, but just for 20 minutes. And then thereafter, you have to switch to something else. So you know that, for example, let's talk about access to devices. It's not a good idea for your child to be hooked on devices all the time. You want to give them, a chance to rest their eyes. You want to give them a chance to explore other aspects of their life and environment. So therefore, you limit the amount of time that they spend, and you know why. And so you're able to either explain it to them, or you're able to hold your ground, even if they get fussy or whatever, because I'm not going to allow this because of this particular reason. So you're acting out of purpose. You're not acting just because you don't feel like you want them to do that. You're not acting just because something annoys and you're upset, but you're acting out of purpose. And so that helps to guide how you respond in the situation. Then no, for a reason, I think perhaps the way you said it made me wonder if you're thinking about giving a child a reason. And there's definitely room for that.
Indeed, how important it is to give a reason for discipline to the child. How important is it to explain why
mommy is not allowing you to do this because of this. Or sometimes your child has to be able to obey you without questioning it all the time. So there's room for that boundary. So just trust mommy, don't do it, right? But there are times when, yes, it's appropriate to explain it to them, to help them to, be living a principled life, not just a life of fear.
And how important is it to, as we have mentioned too, but to reemphasize, not disciplining out of anger, the consequences of that, etc., and the implications.
Yeah. So I know that children can be very infuriating. Yes. Every parent is angered by their children. I know that. Yes. And sometimes they do things deliberately to get on your nerves. And so it's a struggle. It's a struggle to manage the emotions that arise during parenting, because you're tired. You worked hard all day, and then you come home to these children who are just testing your last note. So I acknowledge that,
manipulators. I call them manipulators.
Right. And they do that. They do manipulate, right? So I acknowledge that. However, the challenge is that when we discipline and we respond to our children out of anger, and for some of us rage, the challenge with that is sometimes we'll do things that we end up regretting. Yes, and then the children end up in my agency, the Child Protection and Family Services Agency. And if you find that you're disciplining in that realm of rage all the time, then that's a challenge. Yeah, it's not good for you, because that's stress on your system, and it's not good for your children, because they learn the character of their parents to be just an angry person. Yeah. So so that limits the ways in to approach for talking and relating and sharing what's going on in my mind and my heart right now. So we have to be conscious about that. And then now at the same time also, we are expecting our children to control their anger. Yes. And if they see us being out of control in our anger, then it is sort of more likely that they too will be grappling with their anger as well, because whether they want or not, many of our children are going to just follow what we do. They follow our example.
Yes, yes. I think as we wrap up, just wanted to raise one of my own questions now is, how does parental discipline actually affect moral development? So let's talk a little bit about morals.
So, and we touched on it a little earlier when I was talking about superego, where a child develops the ability to restrain themselves. And so morals are often about living in a world where you're doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. You're not doing unto others as you would not have them do unto you. You're exercising your rights, but you're not doing it in a way that damages the rights of others. Right. And much of morality has to do with that, has to do, if you're talking from a biblical perspective, you're talking about love, and love is about thinking of the other person higher than yourself. So if a child is learning to restrain themselves and to not just do what I want to do, but to not do it because we know that mommy wouldn't like that and we might get a consequence, or then no, good parenting is inculcating that kind of bent in your child. And so it is more likely that that person is a more moral person, is a person who is able to think of others as and consider their needs as well as your own. So parenting and discipline definitely have a lot to do with moral formation. And also, as you are disciplining your child, as you're communicating with your child, then you're going to be naturally sharing your moral principles with them. It's going to come out. So if you have siblings and the siblings are fighting, then you stop the fights, and they have to hug and make up. So it's all about doing away with conflict and sharing love, making up, forgiving, when somebody has wronged you. Those sorts of principles come out naturally as we discipline. And so it's just about everyday life. How do we conduct everyday life? How do we relate to others? How are we considerate of others' needs and wants as we fulfill our own needs and wants?
Okay, thank you. I have a question on YouTube from Stevenson Samuels. Good evening, Rev. Can a child be too sweet? He says. And how do you handle nice children? Do you turn up the pressure? Do you turn it up?
I think a too sweet child is a rare thing, and I think we should cherish them when we see them. But I don't know, too sweet. Are you talking about a child who's a pushover, who's a doormat, who gets bullied? That can be a problem. Yes, we don't want to have a child who is susceptible to that, because we love our children and we don't want them to be, essentially, bullying is peer abuse. We don't want them to be abused by their peers. And so yes, there are times when we have to empower our children to be able to stand up for themselves, to be able to speak their opinion and to speak what they want. And so there's definitely a room for that. And so in that way, yes, we can have a too sweet child, a child who is too retiring and lets people take advantage of them. You want somebody who can
because you do have some children in the family who are very sweet talking, or they know how to wrap daddy around the little finger. And therefore, does that have an impact on the parent, knowing that, okay, so they took out the car without permission, but this child is good all year round, gets good grades and stuff? I think that's probably the area that this question is heading to, is how do you handle those nice children? How do you really, do you turn up the pressure on them? Because 95% of the time they're really good, but then they do that one thing, as I said, like sneaking out, take out the car, or maybe they borrow $500 from the dresser table but didn't quite ask for the $500. But they're such a nice child generally, want to, Daddy, can I get you some tea? Daddy, can I help you to put on your socks? Daddy, can I, how do you, because we know some of those, that's actually a form of manipulation, right, Melody?
Yes.
So how do you discipline the nice children? How you handle them?
Yeah, and I think that it comes back again to our reasons and our principles. So it's not about who nice you're, but it's about the principle that you're seeking to inculcate. So if a child is sweet and is able to get away with certain major issues, certain major crimes, as it were, I don't like to use that word, but certain major faults. Yes, then they may grow to be someone who understands that I can use manipulation and sweetness to get away with murder. So And I don't really mean literal murder, but
Yes,
hey, it could come in as an adult. And so you definitely need to know why, your whys, and so you put down your consequences as a result, sweet or no sweet. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yes.
so
I think going back to the point you made earlier, it really speaks to consistency too. So you just need to be consistent, whether the child is nice or not so nice.
Right.
Discipline needs to be meted out. I'm going to be very consistent about it. And it ties in with what you said in terms of being principled about it too. The fact of the matter is you could be as nice as Spice, but you did something wrong. And therefore you need to be disciplined for it. So I think it does.
For example, with the theft, I mean, that's I think for most of us is a serious principle violation, that we don't want to be producing children who are dishonest.
That's right.
And so there has to be a response to that. There has to be a response so that the child knows that there are consequences. And we have to always remember also that as the child gets older and when they become an adult in society, the consequences for their actions are going to get more serious. So slipping that $500 out of the drawer can escalate to out of the account when I become a teller.
Can escalate. Yes, a friend leaves something on the side table and you pick it up because you're accustomed to taking money from home or something.
There you go. So we need to be very careful about our principles.
Yes.
And enforce them.
And therefore the discipline is extremely important. I think it's all about encouraging our children to be able to understand that this is all a part of their growing up. The same way that they're raising you and caring for you, sending you to school, discipline is also part of the whole to prepare the child to be a very holistic individual who can manage relationships, because being disciplined, both self-discipline and being disciplined, is also a part of growing up and developing good relationships with yourself as well as others. So I think we had reiterated that point, and it's certainly one that we could probably end on now. It's been a wonderful evening. It has been a wonderful 4 days of positive parenting with VM Foundation. We have our final episode tomorrow, and that will deal with character building, development, and leadership. We ask you as viewers to come back. Come see us tomorrow again at 6:30 as we end our positive parenting series. And we hope that so far it has been helpful for all of you, and that we've been able to provide the tools, the tips, and the strategies on how to positively parent your child. I am Samantha Charles. I am your CEO of VM Foundation. We want to thank all our viewers, as well as all our viewers on YouTube, on VM Group's page, as well as our Facebook, as well as the UE Mona Western Jamaica Campus's YouTube page. Have yourselves a wonderful evening, and as always, we wish you positive parenting experiences always. Have a good evening.